on this episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Hey, Neil, given all that you've gone through in getting to that first 100 million in sales, how would you define courage in dealing with all the hurdles that you've had to get across?
Yeah, well, between myself and my clients to get to that kind of level of business, courage is really defined for me in one phrase. It's feel the fear and do it anyways. Courage is a matter of just starting something in the face of danger or fear or concern or worry and just deciding to do it anyways. To get over it and to get past that point for me has always been the consistency of walking that path and continually walking that path afterwards, that tenacity and perseverance through that. It's just tied to the word courage for me in terms of that aspect. It's a moment of just sheer panic and fear and just overcoming into that moment. It gets a lot easier the farther you put distance between that moment and yourself.
Stay tuned following the interview for On the Couch and Off the Rocker. Our special guest's psycho-silly analysis by Art Lab's own head cabbager, Dr. Ima Freudnot.
Welcome to Therapy Bites Art Lab, where Dr. Heath and his special guests share real-life stories of helping and healing, fresh from the actual therapy couch, while taking a bite out of common counseling missteps and misconceptions. And now, here's Heath and the T-Ball team.
Hey, T-Ballers, welcome back to another great episode, and we have some cool stuff in store for you today. So if you're interested in overcoming hurdles, then we have a guest for you. We're going to talk about how education is great, but high voltage courage may get you farther. How do you overcome pitfalls in the Amazon of life with some real life stories from building a business on Amazon? We'll answer the question, is success limited to the rich? Do you actually have to have a whole bundle of money to be successful? We'll talk some about practical goal setting. What is success after all? And how do you define success? And more importantly, how do you know when you've got it? How do you know if you're successful when you want to become successful? Neil has 9+ years selling, coaching, and mentoring on Amazon using Fulfilled by Amazon FBA with private label brands. Over 15 years beyond his corporate IBM gig. Collectively, he's generated over 100 million in sales. Prior to selling on Amazon, he was an executive of a tech company with patents in the oil and gas fields. He cut his teeth online with affiliate marketing, where he helped a company gain Series A funding from his marketing and lead generation strategies. He left IBM in 2007. Gosh, that seems like a million years ago. In 2007, after 5 years as a knowledge management consultant, and started his own series of companies. Since then, 1,000 clients through coaching and consulting, and he currently supports over 200 clients via his Voltage Holdings organization, which owns software, which is sixleaf.com, coaching for beginnings, ASIN 360 Pro, and mentoring, Voltage Business Builders. Are we in for a ride today? Neil, welcome to the show. Tell us the philosophy of high voltage.
Stay in the stands at the end of the interview, T-Ballers, and witness our special guest slug a bite-sized brain ball with your name all over it, clean out of the art lab.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've never been quite asked that way, so this might be the philosophy side of it might be a little bit on the cuff, off the cuff, if you will. But the business mantra and goal is really just to build great e-commerce companies, thinking with the end in mind, which is the exit, the ultimate goal of the business, to create something with intrinsic value, with intellectual property and IP, and get that to a position where it's a value to someone else who's willing to pay you a lot for that business, and then be able to do it again and repeat the process. So Voltage is really about building and scaling, growing, and exiting e-commerce brands. And we start, again, as you mentioned, with the Amazon FBA space. So our philosophy is really just anybody who has the right kind of profile and has the right kind of aptitude can run an e-commerce company or be taught. I've taught 19-year-old high school dropouts and 76-year-old grandmas how to do this. But it really gets down to a particular aptitude, and we can talk a little bit about what that means. But at the end of the day, if you've got courage to start and you have tenacity and perseverance of mind and you understand operations to a degree, even if you've never had a degree, then you can do this kind of business model and you can do it to your level of success.
You know, I just have to say, I could not have paid you more money to say what you just said. By the way, I didn't pay Neil anything. He volunteered to be here. He's a voluntary subject in the art lab today, or I guess ethically a participant, a research participant. But what I love about that is you gave a pretty wide spectrum there that we deal with all the time. A 19-year-old college dropout and a 70-something-year-old grandmother, because people really, I don't know, it's almost a safety response. People just automatically focus on what they can't do and all the reasons why they can't do it. And it's often because they're too young, and it's often because, or they're too old. I remember as a young consultant, straight out of grad school, I started consulting across the U.S., and I think I was 24, but people said that I looked like I was 12. And that was one of the things I had to get over was, gosh, I'm just too young to do this. What do I know? I've got to wait till I get enough knowledge. Maybe I can start when I'm 50 or something. And then it tips the other way, it seems, in life. And I have folks I consult to all the time, and that's what they say, that they're too old. And I think that you nailed it. It's courage to go forward. And as you talked in the intro, people will view fear and emotion, the presence of fear, as evidence they should stop.
That's right.
And I'm very interested how you yourself got beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look, I grew up in a generation whose parents, mom specifically, told me to go outside and not come home until dinner. So I lived in a very different.
It sounds like you grew up in Arkansas or Missouri.
I grew up in Oregon.
Well.
Yeah. So I've lived all over the country, but in that state, the presence of mind and the life that we led was more of an adventure. It was less of technology wasn't a key indicator and factor in that lifestyle. Technology is now a centerpiece of most homes. It's even the centerpiece of the living room. So that has changed significantly for us. So what it has created in my time frame watching this occur and dealing with some of the bigger things that you deal with in the business world, which surprisingly are not to do with the technology, the business processes or methods and procedures. It has to do with the person. So many times when you reach different levels of business, it has nothing to do with your ability. It has everything to do with your skill ability. And what I mean by that is you need to understand limiting beliefs. You need to understand scarcity, and you need to understand abundance. And
did you just say the word skill ability?
I did.
That's fantastic. I've never heard that before. You guys should write that down. I'm going to steal that from Neil. I'll try to remember to give you credit so that we don't got to get the attorneys involved. But that's a great term, skill ability.
Yeah, the meaning is basically to pull two things together that have to do with literally limiting beliefs and scarcity. And it has nothing to do with your skill or your ability. What it has to do with your belief that you can't learn it or do it because, as you said, you reached a fear, which in your mind is a stop sign. In my mind, it's a yellow. So the yellow is cautionary. But you know what you do at a yellow light? What most people do is they hit the accelerator. They don't slow down. Okay. So I don't see red. I see yellow. I see green and yellow. The world to me doesn't have red. Now, there are boundaries to that. Of course, I'm obviously sitting and talking with you, and I'm not in prison. So the world does have boundaries. But the point here is to recognize that you have hidden limiting and scarcity beliefs that do not appear to you until fear or some other strong emotional adrenaline or mechanism kicks in that forces you to face that fear. At that point, you then learn and discover where your boundaries are. Now, so many people stop and try to remove themselves from scary and fearful positions, even willing to put other people at risk or put them out to stop that fearful position from occurring. And we just watched some of that occur on a global basis. They're willing to put someone else in harm's way to stop their fear and stop their ability or coping mechanisms they don't have from kicking in. They just don't have those coping mechanisms to deal with that. So they avoid it, and they do anything possible to avoid it at all costs. In that way, they're limiting their ability, and they are creating scarcity, and they're creating it of their own free will. And I think this is one of the biggest things for people to understand is that you can overcome that, right? As I said earlier, you can feel that fear and do it anyways. I learned that phrase and became a mantra in my life after reading the book from Susan Jeffries. Now, there's a number of things in there that I didn't like per se, but one of those secondary things that did resonate with me at the time in which I needed to hear that Obviously, feel the fear and do it anyways means I'm going to face that situation, but instead I'm going to consider it a yellow light instead of a red. I'm going to get past that fear and see what's on the other side of it. What is on the other side of it is usually something that changes and defines me. And that's the other aspect that people are afraid of. They want to feel comfortable where they are. They like where the people around them are, and they like the environment, situation, language, and safety net they've created for themselves. And in business, you can't do that. Business is an ever-flowing, ever-changing series of complexities and problems to solve. That is what business is. And the problems just become larger. Okay. And the scope and magnitude of them feel bigger when you're doing 100,000 a year or $1 million a year or, 10 million a year. The challenges and scopes just change, but ultimately it's how you deal with them at the different circles of approach or different circles of comfort that you're standing within. And usually you can't reach those other circles of comfort unless you're standing with someone else who's already in that zone. And if you don't know somebody who's in the zone just ahead of you, who you can step into that comfort zone and say, okay, I reached this new level of life and business and challenge, and they're not there to help support you, you're going to be a little confused. You're going to be in a ring all by yourself. And that doesn't feel very comfortable either. And most people are not comfortable with that. So they, again, to the point, they will do anything possible to avoid that. And they will use any excuse possible, including time and other things, in a scarcity mindset. What is it going to do? It's going to position them to say things like, well, I'm just too busy right now. I can't do that. Well, I have these kids now and I can't do that. Well, I have this job. It takes me here and I can't do that. And you hear them say everything they can't do from a scarcity position, when in actuality, I'm the opposite of that. I have 4 daughters. I homeschool. We manage 45 acres in the country. I have a 1,500 square foot, heritage seed garden we plant. I have multiple companies and divisions within my companies and multiple operators. I even have a non-e-commerce division for a physical trailer. It's a 24-foot independent trailer that has a 5 kilowatt substation, literally with solar panels, that can be rolled out into the middle of Afghanistan and power a city. So the end result is you can do multiple things with time. I'm no Elon Musk, if you look at what he's done, but he has the same amount of hours in a day I do. What is he doing differently? He sees time and money as an ally. And when he goes into the world and says these things that he says and does the things he does, most people cannot understand or grapple with the idea of what he's doing because they can't see the bigger picture vision. And if you can't see that bigger picture vision, then you're going to have courage to step out of your comfort zone in order to even gain your first opportunity to see this and see the world in a new light. The problem really becomes is that you have to leave people behind usually. And the people you're leaving behind are the ones that have been holding you in that scarcity limiting belief this entire time. Could be the people in your job, could be the people in your house, could be your family members, could be people saying, no, that's too risky, don't do that. This is too much money, this is too much time, this is too much whatever. And they see everything, they're holding you back. And if you look at it from a multitude of hands, all those hands are literally holding you back.
I tend to look at those folks in my life as, I don't know, I guess you could call it news sources. I might look at one person as Fox News or MSNBC News or ABC News, but in my mind, they all have an off switch, and the off switch is I read the text, but I decide what to do with it, or I don't read the text, or I don't answer the phone, or I choose a polite, courteous way. I think we can always be polite and courteous to end a conversation. But I usually recommend to people that those naysayers, those, hey, you can't do it. I'm a believer personally, and I'm going through the book of Job right now, and Job's friends actually were kind of really crappy friends as far as
bad advice, including his wife.
Yeah, that's right. Just curse God and die.
Well, I mean, just look at this. Just look at the situation for a second. I mean, with Job and having his wife there, that was a sneaky little devil move, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because his biggest ally in that moment should have been his wife, but in actuality, she was his biggest critic. And when you think about that for a moment, that was a really tough personal situation he was dealing with. Sure, friend.
It really was. And what I would recommend to folks that I see and consult to is, why not view the things that people say to us, and those that listen to the podcast know that I talk about Marcus Aurelius, who talked about that as air set in motion, or as I would say it, it's sound waves carried by air set in motion, and just viewed as information. I could, if I was Job, it'd be very hard, but I might choose to view what my wife had to say as information, and then I get to decide what to do with that information. Somebody that's saying you can't do it might be like a sign that says, don't do this, don't do that, but it's still up to you what credence or what value to give that signpost. And I think it's that way with naysayers. You have to
It is.
decide how you're going to think about it, I think, and not farm out your decision making to the naysaying of other people. But I want to go back to your day because you have so much going on. And it's one of my favorite things to be a fly on the wall of somebody's day. Can you take us quickly through a day in the life of Neil that, I don't know, how do you organize your day? What do you do first, second, third, fourth, 30th or something?
Well, at this point, I'm still a little heavy-handed on my calendar as part of Live and Die. I have an executive assistant that rides with me every day, Nicole, and she watches my calendar and my email and things and kind of helps me stay organized in the background. She also
Hey, Nicole, I want to thank you for the communication. You did a great job.
Yeah, and she's going to be behind here.
My left hand is busy, but I'll give you 2 thumbs up. One's in my mind, one's in my right hand, but you do a great job. Thank you for getting all this organized for us.
She did a wonderful job, and she's always around me, and that's a very helpful thing. She's a longtime friend, but also a loyal member of my business, who's not even an employee. She just has we've been through a lot together, and through that, I've been able to help train, and she's trained me in some things, and we have been just, riding shotgun together for years. And because of that, she helps keep me organized. The affect of it is, if it can be an audio or a text message, it does not need to be a meeting. So I don't have a calendar full of meetings. What I have is standard operating procedures and objectives and key results, OKRs. By that measurement, I have status and check-ins. And some weeks I don't even have a status check-in with my partner of 10 years, Reed Larson, who's been riding shotgun with me in this business model for a long time. He's a super smart guy. He's got an MBA. He speaks 2 languages. He doesn't need me to tell him what to do. He is in his lane and he is operational. If we check in, it's a status check-in to figure out where we are. Occasionally we'll have a longer chat, but maybe once a month we'll spend an hour on the phone. But we are working the business and we are equally yoked in those places, and we know where we fit into that schedule, and therefore we don't need to micromanage or maintain. If I come to him and say, look, I need to spend this money, here's my objective, he's going to say, great, go for it. If he comes to me and says the same thing, we've got that verbalization in place. We spent a lot of time in life and business. He's my married partner, if you will, attached at the hip. But here's the thing that's important to understand about why that works and why I am more free in my time than most people would probably expect. And that is because I manage everything by exception. Management by exception was a rule I was taught by my one of my great friends who became a great mentor later on. And the other thing he taught me was sales fixes everything. So unless you are not focused on sales, but not being salesy, and that's the trick, then you will never want for anything. A good salesman takes any business, e-com, otherwise, and creates it into a good company that has the potential to be a great company, as Jim Collins said in his book. And the end result is that you, as the leader, have to know your strengths and weaknesses, and you have to rely on others and be able to share your weaknesses so that their strengths can come through. And when you rely on that, there's a 3-part principle that's become a factor in my life now, after being alone in the world in business for myself for the last 15 years. And the end result is I have 3 steps. It's fun. It must be fun. And I must have fun in doing it. And it must be fun with the people I'm doing it. That's number 2. And the people must be fun and they must be lighthearted, but they must be good at what they do. And they must know that they're good at what they do, and give them a runway to do it well and support them 100%. We can't go more than 110 because that's going to mess with everybody's head. 100%. There's no more than 100. You can't have 110%. That's weird. So you got to be able to support them 100% in what they do and give them the runway to be successful with it. Okay. And you have to cycle through people to find the good ones. Okay. And I ran into a lot of bad ones. When you find those good ones, you take care of them. You send them gifts on Christmas. You send them bonuses. You take time in your day for them whenever they need it. You become wholly available to those individuals. And that is not phone calls or time on the calendar. That is just wholly available to anybody within my top organization that's available anytime. Okay. The boundaries I set there are honored by the people that respect my life, know me personally, understand my children and my wife and my situation, and they don't cross that boundary. I didn't have to set that line, you understand, because of the caliber of people that they are. So for that reason, they're able to do what they do without any daily micromanagement from me. So my day is freed up to do the things I need to do, to have conversations like this, to talk about business, to do strategic deals, to be visionary in the company, and to line the whole thing going forward in every business. And then sometimes that's just thought. Sometimes that's 4 hours on a mower in my nothing box, okay, with my head going, just thinking, okay? And I think that people don't stop to do that enough. And you're saying, well, how could you make any money in the world and spend 4 hours on a mower during the day and get anything done? Well, the answer is you don't trade time for money when you do that. Now, that's a mistake I made a long time ago. And I traded time for money. I just got more money for my time. And so I lived in a nicer house, but still I was encapsulated by the same 4 walls in the same jail. I just saw it differently because now it had a window and internet access. But at the end of the day, it was the same jail. And if you stop thinking about time again and money, and you stop trading it in certain ways in your life or making excuses for one or the other, you will open up on a completely different freedom, the freedom to say, I choose. And that's really what freedom comes down to, isn't it? It is the ability to say, I choose. I choose to say no. I choose to say yes. I choose to go left. I choose to go right. That is true freedom at the end of the day. And it has no monetary value, because even with no money, you can still make that choice right now, can't you? You have the free will choice to do anything. I could get up today and say, I don't want to be married anymore. People would look at me and my wife would suffer, and so would my children. But I have that free will choice. And once you reach that level of empowerment, that has nothing to do with your environment around you and has everything to do with you. In recognizing that capacity you have within you, you can choose to leave that job today and give your 2 weeks notice and quit. Now, there are consequences. Of course, life has consequences. Causality, right? If you do something, there's an effect, and it can be positive or negative. But the end of the line is you have choices. So the first thing you have to accept is I have a choice. Because everyone comes into this thing, well, I don't have a choice. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the place. I can't quit my job. I don't have enough money. I can't do it. If I say that to my wife that I can't do it, then we're going to fight and argue, and maybe we'll get divorced. So there are consequences and actions to all of those things.
But I think on the choice thing, and tell me your perspective on this, and I want you to continue. But I found from what I see out there's the whole free will thing is losing popularity. It's strange to me that people will talk about wanting to have choice to do this and choice to do that, and freedom to even use whatever drugs they want or to make whatever choices they want. But then when it comes to really doing that, they just don't. They make excuses. As I mentioned before in the program, one of my favorite books that I've not read, but it's on my reading list. It's still on my shelf, not 30 yards from where I'm sitting, in another building, by the way. Is Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, because as you point out, along with free will comes responsibility and consequences.
That's right.
And I think people just don't want to do that. They really want to. Well, in my field, there's the term, I don't use it, but it's out on social media, gaslighting, which we teach people. Mm-hmm. That's just a way of deferring responsibility for your own thinking to somebody else.
It's someone else's coping mechanism. Yeah. Right.
It's not that it's something with me. It's you're controlling the neurons in my brain.
Correct. So you start taking self-accountability back.
Exactly. Not taking responsibility or manipulation. People talk about manipulation, which, gosh, I don't even know how you do that. If I knew how to manipulate people, I would have done it with my kid as he was growing up.
I had somebody try to do that the other day, and he asked me what my pronouns were in the part of the conversation. I said, my pronouns are screw and you. And so if you're not willing to take a hard line on certain aspects, then you can't push back on weaker personalities and weak mindsets. And that's what we're dealing with. And if you've ever listened to Jordan Peterson, you're going to understand this very well, because the man articulates it better than anyone I've ever heard of. Uh-huh. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing is society is weakening itself because of weak men, right? Mm-hmm. You've heard that phrase, weak men create hard times. Mm-hmm. Hard times create hard men, and then it gets worse from there out. Yeah. Because there's a certain point where guys like me and friends around me and lieutenant colonels and ex-military and my friends who are Navy SEALs and these guys I know who are veterans and others, they're being pushed to the line because gaslighting and other things like that have occurred on a daily and weekly basis to them. So they're reaching a line where they're just, the country boys I know out here are already fighting mad. But there's a situation where the line is being pushed and there's a very silent, quiet majority who's done with gaslighting. They're done with you deciding what you think you should make other people do because of their free will. And they're done with any idea that there's a collective outside of a patriotic nationality. Other than that, you can do whatever you want. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
this point, you have to understand, though, that it's those people's free will being asserted against others that is the problem at the end of the day. You want to have your
Yeah.
free will, go right ahead. You want to go right, keep going right. But if I go left, I don't need your opinion. You can
Yeah.
keep it. Like, I'm going left because I want to go left, and left and
Well,
right.
I think the great thing about our country is, well, I would hope free will, but as I told my own son, along with that free will comes consequences, and you can't have both. You can't
You can accept the
skirt the
consequences, right?
consequences and have
No,
free will. They both come hand in hand.
no.
You have to take
You have the
responsibility.
choice to accept those consequences and say, you know what? I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to feel
Uh-huh.
that fear, and I'm going to work those consequences out, whatever they are,
Yeah.
because I am owning the decision. And there's
Yeah.
the big difference, right? I own
And,
the
and
decision.
one of
good or
those
bad.
is in business, I would suppose.
Yes.
Being willing to accept, I hate to say failure, because I don't really think, and I don't want to go off the philosophical cliff here, but that is my background. I don't really think there is such a thing as failure. I think there's
Nope.
such a thing as not getting what you want. I think there's such a thing as things didn't work out as planned. But
That's
see,
right.
I just don't perceive that as failure. I
No,
think
there's
it can always be a
failing up
learning
and failing out.
experience.
So what you're referring to in my world is fail up or fail out. Now,
Ah,
I challenge people who apply to come into my coaching and mastermind to give me experiences of whether they failed up or failed out in life. I want them to tell me where they stood in those things, because I'm not going to have them fail on their dime, on my time, and then go to the internet and slander my name and business because they were already predispositioned to do that by their pattern of behavior to that point. I'm looking for folks who've made a real change, who are on a real, a real pathway, or
uh-huh.
are already moving towards that before they reach me. The reason why they reached me is because they recognized that the path was very different. I'm saying, let's go this way because of these reasons. All right. We're going for fun, people, and profit. Profit is not financial first. If it's financial first for you, then this is not going to work. If you have fun and you enjoy the people, then you will profit from it. Profit personally, professionally, mentally, spiritually, religiously, whichever one of those is for you, and then financially last.
You're saying if you're saying actually going after the money can cause you to miss the money.
100%. Why?
Well,
Why
that
do
is
you
a
think
great
that is?
question.
Right. Because
That is a
my
great question, because
alignment and expectations
most
are
folks
wrong.
will put, well, I mean, in my profession, which is psychology, most folks will put money before spending time with their kids, before maximizing their marriage, before health, before
Yes.
sleep, before being consistent with their values and morals. That
Yes, they'll
money's
create their own
first.
lines they'll draw, and then they'll step right over them.
Uh-huh.
Right. So that's the problem. So if you find that in the personality and you're going to reverse all of those things, it's going to take some time to retrain your brain on that. It's going to take conditioning and retraining, because you've been cycled into a position of believing that there's no better way than that. Because I'm going to do it for financial things is only going to build more glass houses. And I'm speaking from personal experience.
Okay.
Having built a glass house around a marriage one day that I didn't wake up and look at correctly, and what I thought I was looking through was a clean window, when in actuality it was very dirty. And the end result is I woke up alone in that house with no marriage anymore.
Oh,
And the
wow.
end result is I was responsible for my part in that. Now, that's a hard life lesson to walk and have to realize that after the fact. But here's the thing about all of us. We don't usually change until we're forced. Very rarely do you find someone who's willing to change out of self-serving or self opportunities or even selflessness. We change for selfish reasons. I would not have left IBM if they had not left me.
Hmm.
And I thank God every day that they did, because they forced me into a position of change. And I was not willing, because why? It is very hard to leave something that is good to start something with the opportunity to make it great. And that is on the other side of any good thing you're doing right now. And you will create a wall around you of good things that you will tell yourself you can't change, even though you might be researching or looking for something great to do, which would be the real lifestyle as a driven business that you might ultimately want, which is I can make money and still go on the road with my family and be at home and go to their ballets and go to their writing lessons and homeschool them or do anything that I want to do with my family that I'm saying that I want to do. But everything else is so good right now that I'm living in that house of fear. So I'm not willing to risk it to go for great. So I build these walls, and what happens is you don't understand. You're just building nicer walls at different levels, and every time you do that, you're building more walls. They're getting thicker and thicker, and it's getting harder to do. So by the time I speak to a 50-year-old male, what I'm hearing is 5 feet of thick walls that he can't get out of.
For full show notes and transcript of today's episode, go to therapybites.podbean.com.
Individual psychological concepts are very different animals from one another. And while they are often readily observable in the wild, the TherapyBites Art Lab Zoo affords us a unique opportunity to study them in a safe and controlled environment. Welcome to the TherapyBites Art Lab Creature Feature. Oh, good heavens!
Goodness, I wonder where in the world he's gone. I thought we were gonna meet up. He's such a cool little dude. And I know people have said that they've seen him somewhere around here, but good grief, look at me in the middle of a rainforest talking to myself. People think I'm crazy. People. Nobody's here. I don't know why I think people are here, but oh, how long have you been there? You know what? It doesn't matter. Welcome, T-Ballers, to this episode's Creature Feature. I am your host, Safari Sarah, reporting in from this rainforest. I have heard the best news, and you probably already heard me babbling about it earlier. Oh, wait, you didn't? I think you're just being nice to save me from some embarrassment, but that's okay. I have heard that there are ARTs in this area. Okay, so ARTs are accurate, realistic thoughts. And ARTy is exemplified by a little gray. Oh my gosh. I know those of you on audio can't see, but he's right next to me. I've been looking everywhere for you, dude. Where have you been? Okay. ARTs are little gray neurons or brain cells. And our ARTy has a little yellow hat that says TherapyBites on it. He's got a little blue shirt, little green pants, and little yellow sandals. But ARTy, like I said, accurate, realistic thoughts, he is different from all of our other creatures because he exterminates all the other creatures. He exterminates ants, automatic negative thoughts, gnats, negative automatic thoughts, IUDs, inaccurate, unrealistic thoughts. So the goal is to have ARTys fill our brain instead of all the others. So if you see an ARTy, I want you to hold him close, and I want you to use him to replace any IUDs you have in your brain, okay? But thank you so much for joining me for this week's Creature Feature. Like I said, I'm your host, Safari Sarah, and I'm signing off now. Enjoy the rest of the episode, and I look forward to catching you in the next Creature Feature. Bye!
Thank you for joining us for the TherapyBites Art Lab Creature Feature.
You're listening to Therapy Bites Art Lab, bite-sized therapy for your brain with Dr. Heath and the T-Ball team. The best advice on the net. No copay required.
You're slipping beneath the cushions of your bobble-headed psychotherapist's couch, leaving behind empty, echoing, cushy, comforting, pseudo-psychological claptrap. Moving into a deeper dimension of your own mind, where distorted thinking, hurting, hopelessness, and regret evaporate into clarity, healing, renewed hope, and newfound resilience. That's the podcast sign up ahead. Your next stop, TherapyBites Psych Secrets.
Doc Heath here with Psych Secrets, talking about how thoughts create life. Even as I'm speaking, my thoughts create my words. Then my words, as I hear them, which I do even before speaking them, create my own experience. And as you hear my words, you're creating your own thoughts about my words. And the thoughts you create about my words create your own experience. Listen up. Be careful. Pay attention. What words are you manufacturing to create your own experience today?
Once again, Doc Heath rips the cushions from the couch, dishes the dirt, lets the cat out of the bag, uncorks the bottle, letting the genie escape, and blows the lid off of another of the universe's Psych Secrets.
Show your T-Ball team spirit and buy your hardworking Art Lab team a cup of coffee, which helps fuel purchases of high-octane equipment and T-Ball tech that get poured back into percolating, highly caffeinated content for you. Just go to buymeacoffee.com and search Therapy Bites.
Here's Heath and the T-Ball team.
Now,
Yes.
can you give an example of the walls you're talking about?
Well, I'm married. I have children. I have responsibilities. I have a mortgage. I have car debt. I have school loans. I have popularity. I have a high position in my job. I have a comfort zone. I'm making good money. I'm making more than $200,000 a year. I have all of these things, and each one of those is just a layer in their walls that they've helped create as a part of the process they were walking. And they wake up one day, usually on a Sunday, when they're set off to go to work on a Monday, or they got to hop that plane one more time for the week. And they're like, I'm done with this. They snap. They've gone too far. And they're like, I can't do this anymore. And we see men pushing themselves to the boundaries of their capabilities, to the boundaries of their mindset, to the boundaries of their self. And they are, instead of making those choices and feeling empowered to make those choices along the way, they are literally building wall after wall after wall until they are so enclosed that they can't get out. And the only thing they can do is just rupture.
And you did that yourself?
I did.
You say
Absolutely.
you got to that
Ran
point?
Straight into that, 100%. The first time was with my first marriage. I ran into that by life and ambition and pride and arrogance leading the way. And I left my new wife behind. And in the process of doing that, she left me behind. Now, I blamed her because at first she went out with another man and did life and went looking for the things she thought she needed in the world. So it was really easy for me to blame her, and the world said, you're justified to blame her because of look what she did to you.
Mm-hmm.
But in actuality, she left that guy. That's not me anymore. But that was the guy that was there. That guy was self-centered, egotistical, prideful, arrogant, career-driven, okay? Not a good listener, not a good husband, not a good life partner, okay? But it took me a decade after that to come to the full realization of who that guy actually was. And it took many more stumbling blocks and rocks that I stubbed my toes on along the way for me to finally recognize that.
Now, for listeners, let me point out, especially to you guys, what Neil just did that is so rare in my experience, is you have a man here who is successful, who is sharing the inside of his brain with you about his own missteps, misgivings, and misfortunes, and he's taking responsibility for it. The point is, it doesn't mean that you're not all that you can be now. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're a screw up because you've made missteps. But I don't think that you can move beyond your missteps until you recognize your missteps. You've got to be willing to recognize well, it's snowing outside right now. The footprints in the snow that you left, and know that, hey, that's a step I don't want to take next time. I did that this morning. Absolutely. When I walked out here to the Art Lab studio. Once upon a time, I was on my way out here, and man, I'm just full of gusto. I'm ready to go. Shoop, bam! I hit the ground.
That'll happen.
I thought, gosh,
situations, yeah. Well, I have a phrase here. Just to borrow an analogy for a moment, when you go to the base camp and you decide you want to tackle Everest, okay, you're one of those either really awesome or really nutty people who decide they want to climb up the largest mountain in the world because they think it's cool and it's there and it needs to be conquered. Okay, more power to you. But when you get to base camp and you're ready to gear up, you've got to get all the right essentials and tools. And the one thing they won't do is leave you to go on your own without a Sherpa. And the Sherpa is typically someone who's been up the hill 15 times and back. Like for them, this is just another day, another week, another activity. For you, it's the first time. There is every person in your life you can meet and every person you may get involved in. It could be a Sherpa. Could be somebody who's walked that hill and gone, which the point is that you need to understand that those people who did that the first time, third time, 15th time, they learned something that you still have to probably learn. You take 3 feet at a time. Once you leave that base camp, it is every 3 feet. And your footstep thing reminded me of this because I'm going to look back 3 feet and I'm going to look at exactly where I came from. And there should be somebody behind me that's coming with me. If there's nobody behind me coming with me, I'm alone. And if I'm alone, there's a dangerous place to be.
Wow.
Alone is the death of most solopreneurs. Alone is the death of most entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Alone is when you think I can do it by myself. I don't need help. I'm not willing to pay for help or get help or ask for help. I'm alone. Every 3 feet up, Plus, people decide that they don't have, they want to go on this adventure and they don't gear up correctly. They don't have the right knowledge. They don't have the right capital. They don't have the right equipment. And they decide to take off on this adventure. This is back to that fail up, fail out, but it's every 3 steps. Every 3 steps, I have an opportunity to fail up the hill, or fail out, which means I might take a little scenic view off to the left and get into a crevasse and die. So there is a specific path. If I know that I'm going every 3 feet, I only have to make it the next 3 feet, and that's a win. And every 3 feet is a win. And by the time I look back, I'm halfway up the mountain before I even realize it. See, everybody wants to go to the top of Everest, whatever that is. Your Everest may be life, financial, wealth, health, peace. It might be a bigger house, a bigger car, maybe vacations, it may be freedom from your job, it may be that great thing, whatever it is, right? That's your Everest, okay? But you're not going to get to your Everest without going every 3 feet. And guess what? You might get a little bit of frostbite on one of your toes, okay? You might find that life has a roadblock for you. For me, it was a divorce, okay? But the difference is, do I get up and go the next 3 feet? Every 3 feet, I got to get up the next day, wake up and say, I need to go the next 3 feet. And if you can just keep doing that, okay, on this path, you will look up at some point and realize you're up the hill. Just make sure you take enough oxygen and don't go it alone. And most people are typically thinking that they are an island unto themselves, that they can do this alone. And you actually cannot. Really, I am not alone. I never was. When I look back at those situations, the people that helped pick me up, the people that were behind me, the people that I was following, they were all around me. I just never took advantage of what they had given me, not advantage in the negative sense, but advantage in they were there to help me, and I was more arrogant and prideful than I should have been. But they're always around you and willing to help you. And sometimes you have to pay for that. Okay. I pay over 20 grand a year for mentors. I do that so that I will have someone ahead of me continuously, because I'm always challenging and I'm always looking up. I'm always climbing that next 3 feet. And the next 3 feet for me isn't the next big house, the next big job, the next big payday, the next big whatever. 3 feet for me is challenging. It's just challenging, right? I want the next challenge. And it has nothing to do with financial. Now, you might look at me and say, okay, that's easy to say now because you have finances. Well, dude, at one point I couldn't make my monthly bills. I had 4 kids and a wife who was sick. I became the dad. She had the medical issues. I had to take care of the household. We needed $1,856 to make it to the next month, and I couldn't put it together. So I know what it means to be with your back against the wall financially. Okay, that's another stumbling block in my 3-foot road. Later on, getting married and having a wonderful wife and children and finding out she had these terrible medical conditions that didn't manifest themselves until the first pregnancy. So she's 24 years old and she's having transischemic attacks, TIAs, which are called mini strokes. And all of a sudden she is incapable of driving. She is on bed rest. She is losing her vision and has to go get eyeglasses because she can't drive. She is literally a lady who can no longer take care of herself anymore. And this is a woman who's very strong. She's got a 4-year degree as a BSN. She's an RN. She was doing home health on her own, and she was going out in the field and doing these things as a healthcare provider. She was on her way to become an NP when I met her, and I kind of sidetracked her. Different story, but she's really happy about that now. But I sidetracked her career and got involved with her, and it was like we got family, and then she didn't want her career anymore. And I was more, happy to oblige later on with that. But the end result is, health conditions affected us in the first year of our marriage. And, everybody says, health and wellness and all these things are really great, but some of them never really been faced with the actual decision between life, business, and health and wealth and the partner or someone that you're dealing with who has a major medical condition. The whole world derails. All those things you consider priorities are gone. Everything you think was up here and all this and time and all these things you had, they're gone. They don't matter anymore. All that matters is the health and wellness of that person, that kid, that child, that spouse. That's all that
right.
matters. And you don't know that until you've been faced with it. And it's easy for me to say that now because I've walked it. And if you haven't walked it and you're listening to this, God forbid you ever do. But the end result is that there is another step in that 3 foot that you got to take to get through that moment and become what it is that you were made to be in that moment. And for me, it was part of my faith journey as well. I did not have a super strong faith in a believing Jesus, Yeshua. I understood God as an entity and a being, and I understood that of a higher power and intelligence. Personally, that was my path in life, even though I left it for quite a long time in what I call my decade of dark years, which we won't go into. But the end result is that was a big learning curve for me. But as I got through all that and got past that guy and got out of that arrogant, prideful person who was destroyed a marriage, the guy who was now dealing with things was willing to sacrifice anything to take care of my family. And that was not the guy from 15 years earlier. So at that point, you just have to keep pushing forward. And we did, and the money showed up, and I don't even remember how I did it. It literally showed up to the penny which I give credit to God for, because I don't know how. I didn't have a job, couldn't get one, couldn't get back to any consulting or job. I literally was just told to set down, shut up, and hang on, because that we went into a storm in our first year of marriage, and it didn't stop for the next 3 to 5 years.
How did you fit of how busy you are? How did you fit your faith into that?
Well, at that point, I wasn't extremely busy. At that point, I was on and this is going to sound fun, and it's not, but it was, I guess. It's not, well, it is now, but it wasn't then. I was in the middle of a business in which I was you mentioned the exec of a tech company in Oklahoma. I had patents on wireline, and I was a part of a patent in wireline telecommunications that allowed this amazing thing to occur over the grid, and this super cool technology no one ever heard of and no one's ever going to hear of, because the company imploded, and when it did it, it took me with it. And in that process of implosion, I had to file a business bankruptcy. And if you know anything about business, you're tied to the LLC if you're within it. And so all of our stuff and everything was tied up in that bankruptcy in the midst of this medical condition my wife is having. Talk about a perfect storm, right? So in the midst of all of that, and her being pregnant with our fourth child, and dealing with all those medical conditions that have been going on through the first 3-4 pregnancies, that we started to figure out what was happening and dealing with it and getting her, the necessary care that she needed. We, one night at 10 o'clock are watching them repo our van out of the garage with a pregnant wife who's crying and going, "What's happening?"
Oh, wow.
And I had to explain how far things had gone. I tried to protect her from some of it just because of the situation. She didn't need to deal with it. But at the end, we got affected by it. But God planted us in a situation where they couldn't take the house because the house was wrapped up in another business. And that business was not part of the business that was crashing on one end of the house. The other end of the house was just fine, if that makes any sense. But we watched that all occur in the storm that just went around us. And we ended up, going down to a dungy basement in Tulsa's, city hall, where we ended up in a line of like 20 other people. Is the weirdest thing ever. Have you ever seen Joe versus the Volcano?
Yes, a long time ago. Yeah.
It's that nasty gray, thing with the flickering lights and stuff in there. And it always reminded me of that. We're standing in that place, and it was just like this terrible place. And 20 other poor suckers were in there for whatever reason. They had faced this financial issue, and they opened the doors and they let us all in. And I thought this was really strange, because I'm going to go through bankruptcy, and this is not a very good time to do it. I've got kids and family, and this is a terrible situation. And the end result is we get into that room, and it's just this gray room with flickering, literally, lights. And there are 15 tables set up with 15 bankruptcy judges. And they were all sitting behind plastic tables in a room all around each other. And they gave you a number and you walked in. So in your mind, thinking bankruptcy, like most people would, it's you go in front of a judge and there's a court and you get in a courtroom and you're answering to the judge. That's kind of what we're perceiving, I think. That's what I did anyways. But no, it was this guy, and he was just sitting behind the table, and he pulls up our paperwork, and here I am with my pregnant wife, and there's 15 other people, and you can hear everybody talking, and there's crying, and there's just all this stuff going on. It's a terribly stressful environment, right? And I couldn't imagine. I actually felt empathy for the poor guy sitting behind the table. I knew he had my financial and future in his hands to decide what to do next, but I had major empathy for this poor guy. And he took major empathy on us. Don't know why. I think, and I will give credit to God for this, he had the opportunity at that moment to swipe our debt off. Even though we'd made a plan, we had been paying back, and we had good faith options in place to take care of us, because I own everything I do, good or bad. And I had set out a plan, and we were going to own it. And he just swiped it, just in a stroke of a pen. He wiped it clean, and he said, go start over again. And he left us standing there dumbfounded, because he literally just wiped out all the debt.
Oh, my word.
We started out with zero. We were back to zero. But we had no more debt. He'd written it off. He just swiped the pen. I didn't even realize he could do that. And he did. And so he gave us a moment of grace, and I believe it was a godsend, because at that point we changed everything about the way we were doing life and business. We focused on the lifestyle from that point on. We had no choice. And again, that was another stumbling block in the path of life. And what ended up occurring, as you backtrack, is that I heavily leveraged myself into that business, which was a very bad business mistake. I had gotten, again, into the idea that we were building $1 billion company. I got a little too caught up in the idea and the technology. And by the way, it was tremendous. And now I see it at Home Depot and other places, and I go, man, these guys really screwed up, because this was an amazing product that nobody had. But greed, pride, and arrogance had caused them to set up a second books, and they were playing with investor funds. And when I found that out, I went immediately to a lawyer and said, this is going to get really bad. I need out. And he got me out and indemnified. And we went through the bankruptcy in order to protect ourselves from what happened next, because they were messing with SEC security funds and investor funds. And I didn't want any part of that when I found out it was occurring. So all that crashed, and here we are starting over again, reinventing, right? And people talk about all that, and that's a lot of fun. But I'm getting on a little bit of a tangent to
Well, no, it just goes to show you. I have a saying: everything is figure outable. Everything is figure outable.
Wasn't dead yet,
I've
right?
had business ventures, and my wife has asked me, when is enough enough? When are you going to stop, quit, do something different? And I say, when there's no more moves to make.
When there's no more, that's a fantastic saying. No more moves to make.
When business is a chess game, and the game is only over when there's no more moves to make, but then the game's not really over because you can just reset for a new game.
Play a different game and probably solve all the problems so you can't solve anymore.
And most people, I think that's a mistake I see people make is the, how would I say this? To them, the failure is things not working out one time. Failure is things not working out one time. But just think about that, guys. If Thomas Edison, and I know this is a much overused story of Thomas Edison, but if Thomas Edison failure was things not working out one time, we wouldn't have light bulbs, or at least Edison wouldn't have developed. I think he developed the filament that went in those, the tungsten wood that went in those. But that's not failure. That's just an opportunity for plan B, C, and D.
Yeah, I don't have a plan B. Plan B is not on the table.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Is to continue the adaptation of what I'm doing now. And this is one of the major things I learned later on after going through so many different things and failing up and failing down and failing over. I never failed out. Failed out would have been to quit and go back and get a job. Now, that's, for me, that was the ultimate failure in business. The ultimate failure in life, and literally I was just teaching this to an entrepreneurial group of 14-year-old homeschoolers that I'm teaching a class for now, was for us, because we believe in a faith and a higher power, and we understand Jesus, and we know that there's more to this than this world exists, that our failure is not to do what we were called to do in this world, knowing that this is not the end. It's only the beginning of the ultimate journey. This is your opportunity to fail at anything you want to try until death. And then you start a new adventure. So to challenge them as kids to think beyond the worldly situation, to beyond what the world tells you can or cannot do, is to not accept true abundance. True abundance as it was given to us in a free man state, which is within the republic and constitutional republic we live in. We are free men. We are taxed unfairly. We are licensed unfairly. But if you literally go back to the original statutes written in the constitutional republic, we are free men. We are as free as the eagle, who does not need a license to fly in the air, who doesn't need a license to drive a car, who doesn't need a license to fish in the river. And neither do we. Now, that's really hard for some of you to understand, and you may have already shut this podcast off listening to things like that. But at the end
hopefully
of it,
not. Keep listening, guys.
You have to recognize we are free men. And as free men, okay, and I use that word in terms of its original context, we could be free persons, okay, not to exclude the women, but the word and language in the Constitution is free men. And the end result is that we have the freedom to do what we want. We are being subjugated in this world by authority. And authority is not necessarily of the best power. And in power, as we know, corrupts absolutely, and we're dealing with some absolute corruption. So at the end of that, we have the ability still to navigate as free men in this world. Sure, we have certain boundaries and things and legalities now we have to follow. We got to give Caesar his due, as the Bible says. But the end result is we can still work within that and act like free men to a degree. And if you are subjugating yourself at this point, you are literally the only one guilty of it. You may say your boss stops you from doing this. You may say your wife, and I'm not saying wreck your marriage to do this, please don't. But none of these things are things you cannot overcome unto death. So if you stop and realize these things, you would start to program your brain away from the negativity. You would start to program yourself away from the authority, and you would start to realize that your personal innate ability, your creativity, your God-given DNA gives you the opportunity to be you, uniquely you. Your dominant personality is just fine. Your influencing personality is cool. If you're a steady rock, that's fine too. If you're more conscientious in life, that's cool too. Don't let anybody take that away from you. Okay? Don't let them take it away from you because of their fear and weaknesses and inability to overcome it. And that is the world we live in right now. Subjugation by other people's weak minds. The strength in business or life comes through every one of these challenges that I've faced. And I can talk to almost every person about every challenge because I've had every one of them. Literally. And I asked for a challenge early in life, and God has given me nothing but challenges. But he's given me an opportunity to overcome them. And because of that, I have a crazy story of continued changes and challenges in my life that he's given me the ability to talk to just about every person at every situation. I've been a depressed guy. I was a guy who at the end of that marriage decided that at 130 miles an hour on an I-70 highway in Kansas City that I was done.
Oh my.
I was 2 inches from pulling the wheel into an embankment on I-70. That's
What changed
I set
it?
out to do.
What changed course? What stopped that decision from being implemented?
Innate desire to survive.
Ah.
I know I have it now because I've been pushed.
Uh-huh.
If you don't know that's you, you've never pushed yourself far enough.
Find a reason to survive.
I needed it. There was no other point. The family that I know was gone. The life that I had been building was destroyed. All I had was debt, okay, and a few possessions that I had in my life that were of value to me. Everything else was gone. There was, in essence,
but you know, Neil, a lot of people say that, though. They say everything I had in life was gone, and I would challenge that. I would say that no matter what situation, guys and gals, you're in, what you always have left, always, is talent. Now, let me be specific with that.
Mhm.
Not that this is particularly a religious podcast. I guess we're religious about podcasting, but I'm a spiritual guy, and Neil's a spiritual guy. But in the scripture, it does talk about talents, and there's a parable of the talent.
Okay.
Well, let me relate this to all of us to say that your talent is you. You are your talent. And like in the story, you can decide to go out there and bury yourself through just sabotaging yourself and sabotaging thinking, bury yourself literally with, suicide or whatever. But that didn't work out too well for the person that buried their talent. Don't bury your talent. Your talent is you.
Yep.
Your talent is meant to be. Your talent is always figure-outable. Your talent is always applicable to solving someone else's problem, someone else's difficulty. And I'm not trying to shame anybody, not that I have the power to do that. That's your own thought process. But truly, shame on you if you bury your talent such that it fails to help other people when that is the intent of your existence on this planet. The intent of your existence on this planet is using your talent, which is you, to improve the lives of others.
And I was just reminded by this because my girls just went through their first play, and they did It's a Wonderful Life at the little homeschool co-op theater group that they held fun. And there ended up being like 30 kids, which was crazy. Nobody thought we'd have that many. And they went through this little play, and they did 2 shows, and they built the whole thing and scripted it, and the whole thing came together. It was so cool. But in that process, I was reminded again about the basic message in It's a Wonderful Life, right? Because he faces that moment that you're just talking about, and he decides that it's not, worth it because thankfully an angel comes and tells him what's going on. But there's one other segment of that people sort of forget. And it was the part where his brother was going to drown, but he didn't. And it was the impact you don't understand until the last segment of that movie. Okay. The last scene, when you realize that the brother who would have died saved an entire transport of men.
Oh.
So in that moment, you recognize that you cannot see the impact your life has. I could not see it in that moment. I was blinded by anger and hatred. I was blinded,
and
by
you can't see the awful hole
that you're going to
leave. The absence of your presence would make. You can't see that. You can't see the vacuum that you're not fully filling the space in the universe that you're meant to fill.
If it's just one person, not 1,000, that you can affect positively by your life experience, then you should understand that is not worth it. And for that moment, I don't know exactly what reason is that I turned that wheel away, but I know now the hole I would have left in life and experience and the people around me, I ultimately would have hurt in that moment of selfishness. That's how I would describe it.
Well, I can tell you, let's get neuroscientific for a minute here at the top, or should we say bottom of the episode or the end of the episode. And that is that without knowing it, Neil had along the way built stepping stones in his brain that have become subconscious reasons to continue existing. It doesn't have to be something big, but guys and gals, every day you wake up, find a purpose for being here on this planet. It may be, I'm going to smile at somebody today. I'm going to make someone's life a little bit easier by emptying the dishwasher. I'm going to, say hello
to someone else before I think about myself.
Yeah. Do something, do something that adds some value to someone else's life. Well, let's talk about some memorable takeaways. We've talked a lot about lots of things here, and what would you leave our guests with, Neil? What would you tell them to take with them from our episode today?
Well, I know we haven't talked tremendously about business, and I hope you understand why. Because business is just an aspect of things we do in the world because it requires the money and the system of the world that we need to live in. So anything you choose to do to this point should be for the greater benefit of someone else. If you can put someone else ahead of yourself and start thinking about just your own needs, even if they're difficult right now, because I'm explaining all the needs that I've had in the past and they were difficult. And the end result is that when I had someone else to focus on, when I was given the opportunity to serve others in a servant leadership position, that is the most rewarding situation I've ever been in. And it is the one that I've continuously kept myself in. If you put yourself in a servant leadership position beyond self, then the rewards and the money and the opportunity and the self-fulfilling daily affirmation will come from those things. They will come from them because you are no longer just self-serving. And until you change that, nothing else is going to change for you.
Fantastic. Guys, we've been through so many things today, and I hope you go back and replay the episode. Education is great. I've got lots of that. Neil has some education, but high voltage courage might even get you further. And here's a note from Doc Heath on what that is. Courage is a system of cognitions. Courage is built on a system of accurate beliefs that only you can program about yourself. We talked about overcoming pitfalls in the Amazon of life. Success is not just limited to those millions of dollars. You have a purpose, you have abilities, you have talents, and the biggest talent you have is you. We've talked some about practical goal setting and Neil's wonderful, wonderful example of how he paces himself each and every day, and then how to define success is not with money, but with helping others. And before we go, we've got a couple more questions just real quick for Neil. Neil, what would you say is your top favorite high voltage hack?
T-ballers, time to quit your lollygagging. Get out of the dugout, onto the field, and live the art life.
It's going to sound a little cliche, but it's something that with my new folks who come on board, those who have no experience in e-com or business, really we're teaching them the fundamentals of business first, and then we're giving them an opportunity to learn what e-commerce can mean in the fundamentals of business. It's the training and conditioning component. The number one thing I can do for anyone is teach them how to train and condition themselves towards positive things in every 21-day cycle. That could be the type of product and research they do. That could be reaffirmations of something that they need to do positively in their life. It could be a health activity every day for 21 days. It is something that is going to train and retrain and condition them towards a positive outcome, something they're not doing themselves right now. That is an important factor in any ability to overcome challenges, is to get into a self-coping and conditioning mechanism for you, whatever that is.
Fantastic.
Drinking every day. Don't drink every day. That's not a coping mechanism.
Just that's good advice. And if you want more information from Neil, you can go to www. These days, I don't think you even have to type in the www. It's just assumed. VoltageDM.com. 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 And Neil's group has a free case study presentation and many examples of client successes that explain his 5x5 game plan that's been refined over 9 years and generated over $100 million in collective sales for his companies and client. And one last thing before we let him go, as we do with every guest.
We journey now with Doc Heath as he submerges with our special guest into the depths beneath the dark recesses of the therapy couch.
Neil today, and we have our question right here, kind of a psychoanalysis thing that we like to do. And let's see what we have in store for Neil this morning. Okay. Neil, you awake from a dream in the real Amazon rainforest. What would you say is step one for survival?
Well, okay. My dad was an 8-year Navy veteran, although I never had the honor of serving in the military. However, I did have the option and fun of being a Boy Scout in the mountains of Oregon, which means we didn't huddle around a table and do just art. We got out in the field and, one of our survival things was to spend 2 days in an ice igloo and come out and get our survival badge. So to that degree, having wilderness experience to some instance, but never Amazon, I would know that the first thing you'd want to do is to orient yourself and to understand as best as possible which direction is which. From there, there's a series of things you should do next. But step one is to orient yourself.
I love that because I think that's so applicable to any life problem, any business problem.
Yes.
Stop, breathe, and think. I recommend it all the time. SBT, 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 guys. Stop, breathe, and that gives yourself time to think. If you notice, guys, it really, when you're talking and exclaiming and proclaiming, you're really not thinking. Thinking comes when you take time for the in-breath. Take a breath and think. I love that, Neil. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show today, T-Ballers. Thank you for joining us. Come back for the next episode. Go back, listen to this one. Go over, check out some of Neil's information. It's great stuff, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Welcome to On the Couch and Off Our Rocker with Dr. Ima Freudnot, where we review our special guest's Therapy Bites Art Lab episode, Psychomalarkey Scale Assessment Results. That's PMS for short.
Neil Toi's PMS performance places him in the 96th percentile on the PMS's HVS, High Voltage Scale. This indicates a shockingly high degree of entrepreneurial electricity in Neil Toi's cortical crevices and a terrifying tendency toward e-commerce excellence. Overall, Neil Toi's PMS psychosillymetric assessment results present a picture of an individual dreadfully apt to zap through the thickets of the Amazon business forest, and who supercharges these torrential, implicit, electrifying impulses by grounding himself in the philosophy of high voltology. This courageous conductor of currents likely has an electrifying prognosis of illuminating the path for others in the near future, until these gravely turbulent features of his psyche have been psychomologically analyzed and exercised. It is my considered conclusion that Neil Toi be prescribed no less than a 920 milligram IE intra-entrepreneurial dose of Riskitolium and a 2300 milligram IA intra-Amazonian dose of Jungle Jolt Oxycin to amp up his venture voltage-related psychomosis. Dr. Ima Freudnot, Chief Shrinkstigator, Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Grab some of this episode's guest merchandise, specially designed to help keep this episode's message top of mind in your life. Don't forget friends and family members who could use an Art Lab mental boost too. Just go to therapybites.myshopify.com.
Hey, T-Ballers. Thanks so much for being with us today. If we brought value to your day, show us some love by leaving your positive feedback and inviting some friends to listen in. And join the T-Ball team.
Government legal gobbledygook. Not intended as a diagnostic or as an alternative to professional clinical treatment. Resources and advice are for information and entertainment purposes only. Brought to you by someone saying things you don't like? Tape that nagging loudmouth shut. Government-approved speech tape. Gas tape. Now available at your local hardware store. Therapy Bites Art Lab is not an approved, endorsed, authorized, butt-kissing affiliate of the United States Special Offense Assessment Police. SOAP Police for short. Warning. Consumption of Therapy Bites Art Lab content by Kool-Aid drinking, stinking, thinking, social media, pseudo-psychological pushing, wacky woke anti-free speech mumbo-jumbo advocates may cause spontaneous internal skull combustion, stomach discomfort, and or laxative effects. Allergy warning. Therapy Bites is manufactured in a facility that challenges nutty distortions, processes nuggets of accurate, realistic thinking, and life-affirming beliefs. This is the audio version of the legal fine print. Why are you still listening to this when you can catch the next great episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab with a good friend or family member? Really? Are you still there? This is getting silly. Move on to the next psychologically thrilling episode of the best advice on the net. No copay required.
Me eat copay.
Yeah, with Dr. Heath and the T-Ball team. Go ahead, don't be podgorophobic. Scoot, scoot, scoot. On to the next episode.